Much. With this, we'll formally start the webinar. I'm very happy to have a practical session today on the European Research Council and its grants for top researchers anywhere in the world. We have some insights direct from ERCEA Scientific Officers, a current grantee, and we're very happy to welcome the new Science Counselor of the European Union Delegation to the United States. I've already mentioned that I've shared those questions and comments with all the speakers in advance, so we'll be able to get to some of those previously asked questions towards the Q&A session at the end, and we'll take your written questions live during the Q&A. So please don't hesitate to share any thoughts with us in writing. We'll get to as many as we can in the time allotted. And I'll also start with a very brief summary of EURAXESS and the free services that we offer to support your research career. First and foremost, I also want to ask a few questions with a live poll. So before I jump to EURAXESS, I'm actually going to pause my sharing of my screen and jump to a poll here. So I'd like to ask, firstly, where you are based. So we, as the EURAXESS North America hub, we cover the United States and Canada. However, we also have many Americans, Canadians, and people of other nationalities based in Europe. And I'm always happy when we see people tuning in from other parts of the world as well. So this will just help us get a quick idea on who our audience is. I'll be able to, you'll all see the results in a moment, and I'm happy to say about 2/3 of the audience has already given us an answer. And the second question is how familiar you are currently with ERC grants. I will be sharing links to recordings of webinars we gave last year in ERC grants. The specifics of the application process and the funding scheme itself does change on a year-to-year basis. So I would caution you to sort of use those webinar recordings as general insights. But today will be the real updated significant guidance for the 2021-2022 period. So it looks like just over half of you are saying you're not very familiar with the ERC grant. So I think this is a great place to learn more. And if you're in the just under the half that's saying you're somewhat familiar, I'm also positive you'll receive some insights here. So I'll end this in just a moment. I think you can see the results here just for reference. Will be useful for all of our panelists and speakers, and then also just to get a sense for the demographics of others in the audience. So I'll stop sharing that. Let me resume my screen share. And we'll get right back into this. So thank you. To give you a quick introduction to EURAXESS services, I will clarify in my opening remarks that we do not fund mobility directly. We act rather as an official information broker, connecting you to plenty of European opportunities like these ERC grants that we're discussing today. EURAXESS is an overall project, was established 17 years ago. We are an initiative of the European Commission, and it is a network of 42 European countries and 9 hubs around the world. As I mentioned earlier, and as you can tell, we are the North America hub, providing assistance to researchers based in the US and Canada, regardless of nationality, field of research, or career stage. Our aim and our job is to help researchers with their mobility and professional development. And we have 5 main tools to do this that are accessible from our main portal. If you've been a EURAXESS member for some time, or you've used our website, these titles should look familiar to you. We have the Jobs and Funding tab, which includes scholarships, grants, fellowships. These are updated live, and they are vetted centrally. We have a hosting, offers, and partner search tools. So whether you represent an institution or yourself as an individual, this is where you can find partners and apply for funding. We have career development modules, training modules, self-evaluations, and other resources. Information and assistance. There are over 600 EURAXESS service centers throughout Europe. They offer country-specific expertise, or NCPs, or national contact points, that can provide you information on specific funding schemes or thematic areas. To briefly speak on the North American side, Canada has nominated NCPs for Horizon Europe. So those will be publicly announced in the near future. And unfortunately, the US does not have NCPs. So your specific questions can come to us at EURAXESS North America. And you can also reach out regarding the specific funding scheme or thematic area to an NCP based in any European country of interest to you. They speak the host country language and English. They're excellent communicators. I oftentimes rely on them to provide me insights. So I feel confident that you'll get the assistance you need from us or from them. And then finally, EURAXESS Worldwide is the global arm of EURAXESS. This is where you can find the hubs outside of Europe, and there are 9 total. We provide updated information on calls, events, opportunities, training, and with this being the first year of Horizon Europe, the 7-year framework program for research and innovation, I think this is a really good time to be learning more about things like ERC grants and all of the other open calls. So I hope that you'll use us to understand EU funding and what's in it for you. I'll just briefly mirror those 5 sections I mentioned. These are some specific sort of example items of actions you can take or things you can do. So regardless of your affiliation, you can search for jobs, funding, post an offer if you're offering those things, network and find partners. You can also request us to speak to your audience if you represent a university or a certain group and you want to help them understand what resources Europe is making available to them. My colleague and I are very happy to do that, and all of our services are free. And then finally, we talk a lot about supporting Europe and promoting Europe as a research destination. I want to talk about the other direction very quickly and say that we act as a platform for the European scientific diasporas in North America. So these are the national networks of researchers and scholars in the US and Canada that provide information of relevance to their countries. So if you are a European based in the US or Canada, or you want to connect to the diaspora community of researchers from any particular European country, please connect with us and we're happy to get you in touch. So with that, my colleague and I, Dr. Daria Buyuktiner-Karajan, who's in the audience today, we are at your service. As I mentioned before, all of our activities and services are free. So please contact us here at the email address you see. I'll also be in the chat sending some URLs to our website, social media profiles, and our Flashnote email sign-up list. I'll reiterate the usefulness of what we call our flash notes. Those are emails we send twice monthly with events, funding opportunities, and news. Many of you may have found this webinar through that, so I'm very happy to have a lot of you subscribe to that already. And I said I'll be sharing the links. This is clearly not clickable since I'm screen sharing, but I will make a PDF of this presentation available later today, so you can access all of our social media platforms here. So I'd like to welcome all of our speakers. I'll stop my sharing here, and we'll get ready to transition to the next speaker. So I'd like to thank our science council, the new science counselor of the European Union Delegation to the United States, Florent Bernard, who's here today. If you'd like to take it away, thank you so much for being here, Dr. Bernard.
Dear Jackson, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, welcome to this webinar. It's a great honor for me to do this opening. I'd like to first welcome everyone wherever you are. I see that there are researchers in the US, in Europe. I've seen messages, colleague joining from Pakistan, from Nigeria. Welcome to all. It's really amazing that you're able to join, and I hope you will enjoy this seminar. I would like to thank, of course, the amazing work that has been done by the colleagues in EURAXESS, by Jackson and Daria, and also, of course, the colleagues back in Brussels in the ERC, Davide and Nadia. So I think it's an amazing job you are doing, and I'm so grateful that you invited me to speak here. I'd like to also welcome the scholars that are part of this seminar, Professor Greg Mittman, who just joined, I see. So I'm going to have a very short presentation, but I'm going to do something quite unusual. I'm going to bring you through a short history trip. And I will finish my presentation by sharing with you two messages and one reflection. In order to understand these two messages and this reflection, you'll have to pay really attention to what I'm saying, because of course, everything is linked. So first of all, I'd like to start to put a bit of perspective of what the European Research Council is. It's actually today's expression of a millennial tradition in Europe, a tradition of mobility, of exchange, of openness and excellence. These traditions dates back from the Hellenistic period, so 300 BC, where we already had centers of excellence in Athens, in Alexandria, in Antioch, in Syracuse, or in Perga. And those centers of excellence were exchanging scholars. And this period, because of this exchange of scholars, of these centers of excellence, was one of the most vibrant and productive scientific periods in the history of Europe. So that's very important to understand that this concept of openness and exchange and excellence are really part of the Europe's DNA. This is really one thing we should insist on. That's the tradition that the European Research Council is holding today. Fast forwarding to the Middle Age, another example where with the birth of what we call Studium Generale, which later became the universities, also foster free exchange between at first Salerno University, Bologna, and Paris University, and further later with Toulouse University. And soon all the European universities wanted to join this free exchange of scholars program, let's say, and they were only accepted if they were reaching a certain level of excellence. Funny enough, back in time, the Oxford University refused to join this network of European universities, thinking they were good enough by themselves and not needed to agree with the other university on this shared program. But of course, they realized later on that it was not in their interest and joined later on. Again, just like in the Hellenistic period, this free exchange of scholars was at the origin also of another golden age of Europe, which is called the Renaissance, that we all know about. So I think it's important to remind this, and to also fast forward to another period, which is the 1700s. And for that, I'm really particularly grateful to be able to join from Washington, DC, because it represents the deep ties that have lasted since then between Europe and the United States of America. So back then, in the 1700s, we have witnessed the American Revolution first, then the French Revolution, and the founding fathers of the United States and the French Revolutionary embraced what was at the time the Enlightenment thinkers' philosophy to implement their new way of governing the modern France and the birth of the United States. And this is the reason why we are sharing the same values on both sides of the Atlantic, because both modern Europe and the United States, the foundational blocks of these two regions are based on the same origin, which date back from the Enlightenment. In Europe, these philosophy spread all over the continent. It became the Illustration in Spain, der Aufklärung, what is today's Germany, el Illuminismo in Italy. And these are not just traduction or translation of the terms les Lumières, which originated in France, but there are local expression of the same principle. And actually, I think it's really important always to remember that Europe has a coherent cultural area, because whenever a good idea is born in one region of Europe, it spreads all over, and we are all the same expression, different expression of this same principle, basically. So these Enlightenment, les Lumières way of thinking is at the origin of today's shared value between the US and Europe, of democracy, of rule of law, of individual rights. And this is extremely important to remember. But why am I saying that? Why am I talking about this in a seminar on researchers? Well, because part of this package of thinking of the Enlightenment is also the use of science and technology with a very precise purpose, which is for the progress of humanity and the freedom of mankind. So I think it's important to insist on that on both sides of the Atlantic, science and value are indissociable. This is part of the same package, basically, that dates back from these periods. And again, of course, we are all today witness of what was back then this cross-fertilization between the both sides of the Atlantic. We know what the amazing development of science and technology that started in the 1700s and today are results in an amazing progress in technology that we are all using and seeing today, and that allows us to speak basically by being 5 or 10,000 kilometers away. So I think it's important to remind all this. And as I promised to finish my intervention, I'd like to share 2 messages. The first one is the importance of openness, exchange, and excellence. These are the DNAs of Europe. And you as researchers, you have to promote these concepts and hold them throughout your careers. Universities that closed down on themselves or do not welcome foreign researchers are universities that do not perform. We have seen in history the golden age of Europe are stemming from this exchange and this mobility of researchers. And also the spread of good ideas is stemming from this circulation of brains, basically. That's my first message. You are the proud descendant of these scholars, of this millennial age tradition. And that's also why the European Research Council is considered as the crown jewel of the European Union. The second message I want to share with you is on values. I've said that science, the conduct of science and values are inseparable. These are two things that goes together, and there is a directionality for science. Of course, when you are performing your blue sky research, you are calling on your academic freedom, but you always have to remember that these are embedded in a certain set of values. Europe and the United States are not producing science for authoritarian regime to control their citizen or a few wealthy person to exploit the rest of the population. They have a purpose, which is to make humanity progress and guarantee individual happiness and freedom. Well, I want now to share the reflection that I promise you, because we indeed, I call back on the origin of the shared values of America and Europe from the Enlightenment. But we have to realize that this philosophy was developed in a world that was perceived as limitless, where nature was seen as abundant, where nature was also sometimes considered as dangerous and needed to be tamed. So it's in that framework that the Enlightenment thinkers developed their package I was talking about, of individual freedom, emancipation of the individual, and rule of law, and also using science and research as an instrument to that. Well, I think today that, and some philosophers are expressing these thoughts, that we probably need to revisit these foundations. We see that the world is not limitless. We see that nature has been quite tamed and is in danger, actually, because of our action. And the individual freedom, which originally would stop at the freedom of our neighbor, now our individual freedom has consequence on generation to comes, or on people living at 10,000 kilometers from us. So it is time probably to revisit the foundation on which we're all basing our behaviors, our aspiration, and also the development of our scientific conduct. And again, it's going to be your responsibility to take this into account at the time of developing your blue sky research. You are the forefront of this movement, and you'll have to take well thought steps to ensure that these values are revisited and coincide with today's needs. So I would like to thank for your attention, and I wish you all a fruitful seminar and a fruitful career, hoping that in few years we'll see the results of your research that will change our world and for better. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Counselor. I took advantage while you were making your remarks of also sharing some reflections that you had contributed to us and shared with us recently as the new science counselor of the EU delegation to the United States. So I'd be very encouraged if everyone in the audience clicked that link and read further. I'm very happy now to introduce Nadia Elmjia, the scientific officer of the ERC. So with that, Nadia, I'll give you control and you can go ahead and make an introduction. Thank you so much.
Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for attending the seminar. My name is Nadia Elmjia, and I'm a scientific officer at the ERC Executive Agency. So I'll try to take you through our funding, and I hope you find something that can boost your career there. So up. And the slide is not going off. Yeah, here it is. Okay. ERC is basically funding which is part of the Horizon Europe, the new framework program from the European Commission. The ERC has actually been established by the European Commission under the Directorate General Research and Innovation. We have a budget of 16 billion euro for the next 7 years, and that represents 17% of the total budget of Horizon Europe. So one peculiarity of the ERC is its scientific council. So the governing body is a group of 22 high-profile researchers coming from different countries in Europe, but also representing different research fields. So our new president, Maria Leptin, is a biologist, but we also have historian, astrophysicist, chemist, geophysicists, psychologists represented there. So those people are actually the ones who established the scientific strategy. They are the one who represent the researchers and try to design a funding that actually meets their need. They are also the one directly communicating with the scientific communities, and they are the ones selecting the panel members that will be evaluating the proposals submitted. So not only they nominate them, but they also guarantee their independence when they evaluate your proposal, to make sure that they only evaluate you based on scientific excellence and nothing else. The other part of this triptych is the agency, which I represent today, and our role at the agency is to implement the call for proposals, to organize the peer review evaluation in a close collaboration with the panel members, and we also follow up on the scientific and financial aspect of the research project. And one thing we also do is carry out those communication activities. So what we offer is long-term grants for individual researchers. So those are not postdoc grants. They are really for you to run your research team. It's grants that are meant for high-risk, high-gain projects in any field of science. So any frontier research can be funded. It's totally bottom-up, and you just choose whether you want to apply more in life science panel, physics and engineering, or social science and humanities. So the competition is pan-European, meaning that you will be evaluated with other researchers applying from different European host institutions. There is no quotas on gender, age, nationality. There is no thematic priority. It's really bottom-up. Oh, sorry, just a
I think you nodded your, excuse me, muted yourself briefly, Nadia.
yeah, no, it's okay. So the only condition is to come as an independent researchers and bring your best ideas. We don't even ask you for co-financing. So if your proposal is selected, we will fund 100% of it. So the ERC has been established in 2007, and we are very proud to see that throughout the years, the ERC has really become a world-leading organization and a world-leading funding agency. So what we are trying to propose is really to have a grant that has a big impact on the career of our researchers. So we are proud to see that it has really become a game changer. We are now at more than 12,000 grantees funded so far. They are representing over 85 nationalities, and they are based in 35 host institution countries. They have been really successful so far, with over 150,000 publications, more than 1,300 awards and prizes, And all those people are hiring over 80,000 researchers and research professionals. So for us, that's the best achievement, to really see that we have an impact on the career of our grantees. So more concretely, we have individual grants to offer. So those grants, I mean, we have 3 of them depending on your research career stage. So we have the starting grant, which are more targeted towards junior PIs. So you have to be between 2 and 7 years after your PhD, and those grants are for 1.5 million. For all of those individual grants, you have to be based in Europe, so you need to apply with a European host institution or a host institution based in an associated country. For those starting grant, more specifically, typically the profile we have are either people finishing their postdocs and wanting to start a lab or a research group in European host institution, or they are people who just started the lab. They are very early in their career, but and they want to have significant funding to develop their own research line. The other grant we are suggesting is the Consolidated grant for 2 million euro. And this is more targeted towards researchers 7 to 12 years after the PhD. And those are, researchers a bit more senior than the starting grant. They already have a group and their research line, but they want to consolidate, they want to develop it more. And what we ask them to demonstrate through their track record is more that they are already independent and they have proven research maturity. And finally, the last type of individual grant we have is the advanced grant, and it's for 2.5 million euro. And basically, those are senior researchers who are quite established already, and because this cover any kind of researchers after 12 years post-PhD, we basically ask the panel member to only evaluate the 10 last year of track record. So we only evaluate them on their latest achievement. And in addition to this grant money, you can ask for additional fund to top up these amounts. You can ask for up to 1 million euro. For example, if you are based in North America and you need to move to the EU or an associated country to start your lab or your research group, and this is called the startup costs. You can ask for additional money if you need access to large facilities, like for example, if you need access to CERN or other big facilities that are quite expensive. If you need to buy major equipment, or for example, if you need to fund like field trips or any kind of very expensive experimental settings. The other type of grant we have are the ERC Synergy Grants, and those are collaborative grants. So they are up to 10 million euro, which can also be topped up to 4 million euro for the same reason I just mentioned. Those grants are for 6 years. The individual grants were only for 5 years. And those grants are meant for researchers to collaborate closely together. So that can be teams of 2 to 4 researchers. We don't have any limitation on the number of host institution, country represented, or the movement of staff. The only thing that really counts is really the research project and the significance of having those researchers teaming up together. One thing that might interest you with the Synergy grant is the fact that one of these team members can actually be based outside the EU or an associated country. So only one of them can be based, for example, in North America. So if you don't want to move your lab to EU, but you have really good EU collaborators and you really want to start a project all together, then the Synergy grant is meant for you. So what do we mean by synergy? Well, first, those grants have been designed by the Scientific Council to be ambitious. So the idea is to have projects that you couldn't develop by yourself. So it needs to go beyond what you could develop yourself, either to tackle new research problem or to have an old research problem, but where you will apply new technology. I mean, you just leave your imagination go as far as you want. What you need to show is that this is really a joint effort. So this is not about having a loose consortia, with everybody doing more or less the same or just exchanging data. You have to show that each of the PI is unique and necessary to the collaboration, and that you cannot, have breakthroughs if you are not working closely all together. So the idea, it's not only about multidisciplinarity, it's really to show that each person is essential to go beyond the state of the art. And any PI in any career stage can apply. So this is not meant for a specific type of PI. So a starting grant profile could apply with an advanced grant profile. That's totally fine. All PI have equal importance, even though we have one corresponding PI with whom we have more contact. And you need, because of you need to show that each PI is necessary and unique and is essential to the project. It's important that each PI is strongly committed. So if you have a project for 6 years, all the PI need to be together for 6 years in the project. So to prepare your proposal, the best advice I can give you is to register early and get familiarized with the European Commission participant portal system. So start filling the form and get, to know all the rules, download the right documents, and most importantly, talk to your NCPs, to your host institution, to other grantees, contact the EURAXESS office, because you need to gather as much information as possible to make sure you're ready, because this is not the type of grant that you can just start preparing last minute. So for individual grants, I told you you have an eligibility window to choose in which category you are. Especially for starting grant and consolidator, you have, like between 7 and 12 years for starting, and 2 and 7 years, sorry, for starting, and 7 to 12 for consolidator. You can actually extend this this eligibility window if you can document the following event, because sometimes life is complicated and you need to take a break from your research career. So if you had a maternity or paternity leave, or if you are an MD and you had to make a medical specialty training, if you had to care for a seriously ill family member, or if you had to, I don't know, in some country, military service is compulsory, for example. Well, for all those reasons, you can ask for an extension. It's also very important that you familiarize yourself with the ERC panel structure. We have 27 panel. And pay attention when you download the document to download the latest version of the document, because, for example, in 2021, we have created 2 new panels, SH7 for human mobility, environment, and sustainability, and material engineering for P11. And we also have reshuffled several descriptors in the life science panel. So be careful when you apply. And then a few things to take into consideration is when we mean that ERC funds frontier research, we also include applied research. So don't think that your research cannot be funded because it's to apply. We do fund them. We fund people in university, but also in private for-profit companies. Don't try to have a strategic way of choosing your panel, because The budget is distributed to the panel on demand, so there is no panel that receive more money because the panel descriptor has more priority than others. It's totally, again, it's totally bottom up. It's just what you think is interesting that that can go on. Don't wait for the last moment in your eligibility window to apply, because the success rate is virtually flat within each eligibility window. Publication record is important, but it's not the main reason for a selection decision. So the project, the originality, the potential for breakthrough is at least as important as your CV. And of course, the host institution is not an evaluation criteria, nor do we have quotas or do we evaluate the prestige of your host institution. The only criteria we have is the excellence of your research project. So whether it's groundbreaking in nature, the potential for scientific impact, and whether your scientific approach is innovative. And we also evaluate the excellence of the PI, so intellectual capacity, potential for creativity, and your commitment. Our evaluation are organized in 2 steps. So in step 1, the panel member will be the only one reviewing your proposal, and they will act as generalists. They will evaluate a short synopsis of your proposal called Part B1 and your CV. And after the panel meeting, they will shortlist the applicant that will be selected for interview and pass to step 2. So in step 2, all the A proposal will be evaluated by panel members and specialists in the field that they will have recruited. And they will be evaluating Part B1 and Part B2. So the full proposal, including the methodology. And only after remote assessment and the interview will they take a final decision on your proposal. If you want to know more about our evaluation process and how to prepare, I cannot advise enough to go on those YouTube videos, because my colleagues spend a lot of time preparing them. You have 5 videos, I think. There is one about what to consider before applying, one explaining how to write Part B1, how to write Part B2, how to prepare for the interview, how our evaluation work. So you will know all the nitty-gritty of our evaluation. It's really well done, and it's very, very useful. We have excellent feedback from the people who looked at them before applying. And now you might be interested on a few data. So I have data for North America. So you are not the only one considering applying to the ERC. We actually have 364 grantees who are US nationals, and 103 who are from Canada. I have data on US grantee about the countries of their host institution. So most of them are in the UK, but we also have some in Germany, Switzerland, France, the Scandinavian country, Netherlands. So you just have a whole choice of different country where you can start or continue your career. I told you that Synergy Grants, with Synergy Grants, you had the possibility to continue with your team in the US or Canada. Well, we already have 13 teams in the US and 2 in Canada. So if you are considering a Synergy Grant with your European partners, that's totally possible. And maybe the most important slide of the whole thing is the deadlines. So for individual grants, the first deadline is starting grant, and it's the 13th of January. Consolidator will be mid-March, and advanced grant 28th of April. Please be aware that the deadline for advanced grant is very different from what it is usually. Every year we had advanced grant in the end of August, so beware that this year it will be end of April. And the Synergy Grants, the deadline for the call of 2022 will be already next month on the 10th of November 2021. And those are the links you can follow and that will be present in the PDF that Jackson will share with you in case you want more information. And now I will give the floor to Professor Greg Midman, who will explain to you firsthand what it is like to apply for an ERC grant. Thank you for your attention, and I'll take your question afterward.
Great. Thank you very much, Nadia. I hope I'm coming through okay. There was a fire alarm in our building and I've had to relocate and try using my cell phone. So hopefully this is coming through okay.
Looks great to me, Professor. Thank you.
I think I will be building on a number of things that Nadia already said. And I want to structure my remarks on why apply, why the ERC is such an incredible opportunity. And I'd like to express my thanks to the European Research Council for being able to speak with you all today. It's wonderful to see the international representation in the audience, as well as for awarding me a ERC Advanced Grant, and also the flexibility that they've given and understanding working through trying to get a grant up and running during a pandemic, which has a lot of international components. So the grant which I received, I'm actually not starting until December 1. So I want to talk about the opportunities that ERC grants offer that they may not in your home country. I'll talk a little bit about important first steps in putting your proposal together. And then finally, I'll end by talking about some things that I wish I knew at the beginning when I was applying. So why apply? Why was I interested in applying to the ERC? As Nadia shared, one of the funding categories is the humanities and social sciences, and my professional background and career is as a historian of science, a medical historian, and an environmental historian. Much of my work is interdisciplinary and works at the intersections of the history of science, medicine, and the environment. The funding opportunities in the United States for humanities research are quite limited. And the largest grants available through the National Science Foundation, through their Science and Technology Studies Division, are $250,000. So that confines the kind of projects you can think about and the opportunities available through that kind of funding. As was shared in the slides, an ERC Advanced Grant is 2.5 million euro. So that creates a lot greater possibilities, particularly for doing interdisciplinary work that's bringing multiple people together on a project, which is, I think unique in the humanities, but more and more that kind of approach we see developing. So the possibility of ERC funding in building an interdisciplinary collaborative team that would involve, in my project, I am investigating the history and ecology of emerging infectious diseases and natural resource extraction in West Africa. So it requires, expertise from medical anthropology, from medical history, from environmental history, from epidemiology. We even are doing some work in virology. So it's a complex project. It's a high risk project, and in that sense, I think fits well with what the ERC goals are. The possibility of also bringing PhD students and training them And then also having them work directly on a project is quite unique. Graduate training in the United States in the humanities is quite different than in Europe. You know, I've been training grad students for over 25 years. None of my grad students really have worked on projects that I've been working on, which is different than, you know, in a place like Germany, where you're recruiting students to work specifically, you know, on projects, their project-centered dissertations or research. So that was also very appealing in this context where I was trying to build an interdisciplinary team. Certainly the location, being in Europe, being in my host institution, Ludwig Maximilian University is in Germany, is a lot closer to Africa, and we're doing a lot of field work in West Africa, particularly in Liberia, Guinea, Sierra Leone. And so the accessibility and ease of travel to Africa from Germany versus from the Wisconsin, where I am currently located, was also really appealing. Also, the host institution, the Rachel Carson Center for Environment and Society at Ludwig Maximilian University, has really become an international hub for humanities and social science approaches to investigate relationships between environment and society, and the possibility of being located there with this amazing group of international researchers coming through, and also with an area, a special area of focus that very much corresponds to the grant that I'm working on, was also very appealing. So those are some of just a few of the reasons why I was excited about applying to the ERC for an advanced grant. So what are some of the important steps that I think are valuable in writing a successful proposal? First, I think it's really important to have a relationship already with the host institution. I had previously been a fellow at the Rachel Carson Center, so I knew the people there. I knew the director. I had a sense of the kind of cultural, institution, the institutional cultures of the RCC and Ludwig Maximilian University. I have also served on the advisory board of the Rachel Carson Center. So those were all, I think, real advantages when starting to apply for an ERC grant. One of those advantages is that they immediately put me in contact with the host institution's research office. And I can't not emphasize enough the value of working with the host institution's research office and the staff that are located there. I met with them 3 months before the deadline for the grant. As Nadia mentioned, these are very complex grants to write. Do not wait till the last month to start that process. There's a lot of moving parts, and it's really, and I even had started thinking about this 6 months before the deadline, thinking about the project, what kind of possibilities there might be. I then 3 months beforehand met with the research officers and pitched my ideas. We went back and forth about that, really refined the idea for the project. They were very helpful with that. Once we were able to do that, I think another really important step is familiarize yourself with the panels. In my case, the project could have been submitted to a number of different panels. But one of the things that the research office helped me with is they were actually able to share with me the panel members on each of those panels. And I was able to see their expertise and the backgrounds which they brought and their kind of publication record. And through that we were able to most appropriately select which panel we would be applying to. And also which keywords to use, which are also critical in making sure that your proposal goes to the right body of reviewers, which is particularly, important again, if it's an interdisciplinary project, because it could go to many places. And you want to make sure that the reviewers that are reviewing your proposal understand the kinds of methods that you're bringing and the kind of questions that you're developing, and are really familiar with the own kind of disciplines in which you are trained. So I think I can't emphasize that enough. Another thing that I think is critical is reach out to your networks, reach out to colleagues that may know of people that successfully received an ERC grant, and ask if they would be willing to share their proposals, a successful proposal with you. I was fortunate to have a colleague who received an ERC advanced grant and was very generous and kind to share his proposal with me. And that was really eye-opening, because the nature of the proposal was very different than the kind of grant proposals I was used to writing for US grant funding agencies. And to be able to see that, to be able to familiarize myself with that was really, really helpful. Just as an example, there's a real emphasis on what are called work packages. That was a term I wasn't familiar with. It's not something used in the U.S. Granting agency context, and it seemed at first quite alien to me coming from the humanities and social sciences. It seemed more something oriented towards the natural sciences, but seeing a successful grant proposal, talking with the research office at LMU, I was able to understand what it meant to put that project together into a set of work packages oriented towards more humanistic approaches. And I think that was really critical as well in terms of being able to generate a successful proposal. The other thing, the last thing I would say in terms of really important first steps is make sure you have enough lead time to enable either staff from the research office of your host institution, colleagues at your host institution, other people you may know that have been successfully awarded an ERC grant, to offer to look at a draft and offer their critique, so that you can, you have a friendly audience, and to provide feedback on your proposal so it can go through multiple drafts. And the proposal that I developed went through multiple drafts based on that critique before it was submitted. And the other thing that it's really important to understand is that, as Nadia mentioned, there's the proposal goes through 2 steps. So you write this, what's called a B1 proposal, that's more general. So it's oriented towards people that might be reviewing your proposal that might not be so familiar with your field. And then a more extended, if it gets through that first selection round, a more extended B2 proposal that is really oriented more towards people in your field. So when you're asking people to review your drafts, try and get someone to look at it who may not be all that familiar with the disciplines or field in which you're coming from, and then also try and get someone to review it who is much more familiar with the discipline, in which you're trained and in which your project is in dialogue with. So let me turn now to some things that I wish I had known in advance that might have saved some time at the beginning had I known some of the differences again in kind of the institutional cultures of the ERC as a granting agency and the fact that it's part of the European Union. My proposal involves human subjects, but we're not doing experiments or anything. It's just we're doing interviews with people, oral histories, and so forth. In the United States, a project like that has to go through an institutional review board. In many cases in the humanities, and particularly in the context of history, such a proposal will be granted what's called an exception. I did submit an ethics statement with the ERC advanced grant proposal, but once it was received a favorable review, but once it was reviewed and the grant was successful, in order to be successfully awarded, it had to go through another ethics review process by ERC ethics review officers. That was a very long and complicated process. It extended over 7 months. I think part of that was because of the pandemic, but it also ethics officers were maybe more familiar with natural science proposals. I, as I said, didn't quite understand as much the different institutional cultures of ethics reviews in the European Union versus the United States. I wish I had early on, before submitting the grant, met with an ethics review board person at Ludwig Maximilian University to really understand the dynamics of ethics reviews within the European Union, since they were so different in some ways from where I've spent most of my career in terms of IRBs. Similarly, the data management protocols and another thing that is part of that ethics review process is making sure that the research project adheres to EU data management standards. Those standards, again, those regulatory standards were something that I was not familiar with in terms of EU guidelines, again, because there are different rules that operated in the United States. Again, it would have been really helpful if I had reached out early to data management and a data management officer at my host institution to really familiarize myself and understand how those regulatory guidelines differed in the EU versus the United States. In addition, in terms of when you're putting together your budget, make sure you understand how indirect costs work at your host institution, because those vary in different institutions. And they vary between, again, how indirect costs are understood by the ERC and EU regulatory bodies versus, say, the way they may operate in your home country. So when you're putting together the budget, make sure that you understand what categories are being charged indirect costs, what categories are in which indirect costs are folded in but may not be explicit in terms of your own understanding. Finally, there's a residence requirement, and you can speak better. I assume these apply across all of the grants. For an ERC advanced grant, 50% of your time has to be in residence in an EU country while working on the grant. One of the things that I came to understand after being awarded the grant is that residency requirement excludes your field research. So for example, I'm spending a lot of time doing field work in West Africa. When I'm there, that doesn't count towards my 50% resident requirement. So if you are trying to work between institutions, say, if you're keeping your part of your appointment at your home, your institution, as I'm doing, part of my appointment, I'm still retaining at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, while also maintaining a 50% appointment at Ludwig Maximilian University in Germany. Make sure that you have worked out that you will be able to satisfy that residency requirement over the in my case, 5-year terms of the grant. Those are some of the kind of lessons learned, I would say, that I can share with you in terms of developing a successful proposal, and I'm happy to entertain any questions that may arise. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Mittman. I'm encouraging everyone as we wrap up your comments to submit questions in the Q&A. You can also upvote, view other questions submitted and upvote them if someone else has asked a question you'd like to see answered. And all of us are working diligently behind the scenes to try to type out as many answers as we can, and we'll ask some questions live and then also go over some already answered questions live. With that, I'd like to introduce Davide Innocenti to discuss implementing arrangements, and from there we'll jump to the Q&A. So Davide, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Jackson. I will share my slides with you. Okay. So you should be able to see my presentation, and I would like to, first of all, good afternoon from Brussels, and especially good morning for most of you. I would like to thank the EURAXESS colleagues for the chance to present European Research Council program fostering international participation, but above all of you that joined us numerous today. It's a great pleasure to present you the implementing arrangements, an opportunity to join an ERC team. Implementing arrangements are international agreements promoting opportunities for scientists supported by third countries, funding agencies to temporarily join a research team run by an European Research Council principal investigator. As you can see, there are 16 implementing arrangements that has been signed with funding agencies from 12 different countries. New agreements are signed every year, and in particular, on 2020, we signed one with Japan Agency for Medical Research and Development, and another one with Indian Council of Social Science and Research. So far, more than 450 international researchers visited an ERC project since 2012, and every year we, as an executive agency of the ERC, we launch an internal call for expression of interest to ask our PIs for their availability to temporarily host international researchers. Next call will be launched on November 21. very soon. This is the list of the 16 third-country funding bodies already participating to the program. All the implementing arrangements have been signed so far by the European Commission and the relative third-country research institution or ministries, and those are available on the Additional Opportunities webpage of the ERC. As you can see, one agreement has been signed in 2012 with US National Science Foundation. This was the first one in the framework of implementing arrangements. And another one has been signed in 2016 with the Canadian Trade Agency Institutional Programs Secretariat. But how does it work? I will quickly guide you through all the process. Every year, we launch an internal call for expression of interest, as I told you, contacting all the ERC eligible principal investigators. The ERC principal investigator will have 1 month to express their interest in to host an international researcher. After the call is closed, we will send the list of interested principal investigators to the country funding agencies. At this stage, the pool is within the third country funding agency and the potential visitor, the international researchers. The agency will launch their own internal call with different modalities. This really depends by each one of these funding bodies. They will inform anyway all the eligible researchers that as applicants, they will have to contact an ERC principal investigator independently to seek an agreement on a possible research visit. The ERC PI can accept or not the research visit, of course. If accepted, they have to provide, together with their own host institution, a support letter. The funding body evaluates your proposal and will fund, of course, the successful one. At this point, you as visiting researcher could plan and execute the visit in agreement with the ERC principal investigator. It's important for me to mention you that there are few participation processes and conditions which are common to all the 16 agreements. First of all, the ERC does not intervene in the communication between the ERC principal investigator and you as potential visitor. And ERC as well does not intervene in the selection process for this visiting scientist. This is completely up to your funding body. The visit should take place within the lifetime of the ERC project, of course. This is important because, as you can see in the last point, the visiting researcher can be incorporated in the researcher team of the ERC funding principal investigator for the duration of the visit. Of course, as I already mentioned before, the collaboration will have to occur in similar areas of scientific interest. Now, I just presented you a general structure and processes and all the main conditions of the program, but I want to update you on the state of play of this implementing arrangement program. First of all, how the ERCPIs receive the implementing arrangement. In 2012, when United States National Science Foundation signed the first arrangement, you can see that hundreds of ERC principal investigators immediately welcomed the program. Since then, thousands of ERC principal investigators expressed their interest to host researchers from any of these funding bodies. And these numbers are growing in the last year, exceeding an average of 600 participation for 2020. As you can see, you have 766 principal investigators that are willing to host researchers from US and 714 for Canada. This means that the program is concretely providing to international researchers funded by third countries research institution the opportunity to pursue research collaboration with top scientists funded by the ERC. But how this translates in terms of accomplished research visits? Here you have the number of visiting researchers by year and by country. As you can see, since 2012, almost 500 scientists visited ERCEA principal investigator, temporarily joining an ERCEA team on single long-term or multiple short-term visits, summing up to a total of 12 months. The number of visits grown from 12 in 2012 to 100 as the best result in 2018 call for expression of interest. In the last 2 years, despite all the difficulties due to the pandemic, we still have encouraging provisory results, of course, but you have to take into account the fact that many of these funding bodies suspended or postponed their own internal call for expression of interest. Of course, now situation is going to normalize, and we hope that in the future months and in the future year will be much easier to travel and mobility bans will be actually removed. More in detail, we can give a look now to the details of these visits to better understand the nature of this scientific collaboration. To do that, we represent here the overall number of visits per destination country for all the visiting researcher and scientific domains. Of course, as I told you before, it's expected the collaboration will occur in similar areas of scientific interest. And from this point of view, we notice that all the scientific domains are represented for at least half of the 24 European countries that have been visited so far by at least one researcher. In general, almost 60% of the researchers visited an ERCEA project in physical sciences and engineering domain, almost 30% a project of life science and domain, and around 30% a project of social sciences and humanities domain. Furthermore, there is already a grantee visitors that visit ERC Synergy Grants. So in conclusion, a vast and comprehensive collaborative offer already translates in practical terms in hundreds of research collaborations and involving hundreds of top researchers of every level of experience in Europe and across the world. I will leave you mentioning again that the next call for expression of interest, our internal call for expression of interest, will be launched in November, and the internal call for expression of interest from the different third country agency will follow in the next months. Meanwhile, we as an executive agency of the ERCEA, we are providing you full support and information if you're interested in this opportunity. You can visit the additional opportunities webpage, and you can contact us at our functional mailbox that you will find in any way in the slides. So thank you for your attention, and thank you, Jackson, for this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Davide. I'll jump into the Q&A with a question that I think is for you. Someone asks about Mexico. Can a Mexican researcher be hosted by a German university? I would say outside of the context of implementing arrangements, yes. So could you just briefly maybe summarize your presentation for this individual's specific context? How would a Mexican researcher in Mexico who wants to go to Europe benefit for when an implementing arrangement is finally confirmed and completed?
Yes, thank you. So far, as I already told you, there are 16 implementing arrangements that have been established. Of course, these are established with funding bodies in different countries. For example, there are countries which are already hosting more than one implementing arrangement. Of course, a Mexican researcher which is affiliated or awarded with the Mexican funding bodies participating to the implementing arrangement can actually participate. This is the participation will be basically will go through the funding body in responsible in each country. This means that they will have to open an internal call, which can have different modalities. For example, in US, they launch Dear Colleagues letter, but there are different options. And of course, there are different eligibility criteria, depending by the decision of each of the funding body. These could change every year, and there is some flexibility. And but this, of course, is really depending by the decision of the funding agencies. Of course, you have also to take into account, and I will finish with this, that every year there is the possibility to have new agreements. So even for countries which are not participating right now, for example, next year could be that a new opportunity will start. So this is really depending by negotiation at the Commission and Ministry level.
Great, thank you so much. I'll reiterate an earlier comment I made that if you've asked a question in the chat and we haven't been able to address it yet, I'm not sure if you have a copy and paste functionality. It seems to be working for me, but if you could retype or share that in the Q&A box as an attendee, that'll be a great way for all the speakers to see that, to preview that, and hopefully we can give you a written response or a live response here. Dr. Nadia Al-Majid has been already answering a lot of questions. I've answered a few. So I think what I'll do is we'll go through live some of the pending questions, and I may look at some of the answered questions, which in the most part should be viewable to all of the attendees. So you can upvote existing questions that you'd like us to answer, as well as see some of the responses we've written in the last few minutes. And maybe some of the common themes that I see multiple people asking similar questions. I'll try to have us just discuss those briefly. So I've written out one or two already. Nadia and colleagues, I've seen multiple questions regarding how to identify the appropriate panel for an applicant. I know you've touched on these, but Nadia or others, could you briefly reiterate any suggestions you have for an applicant to make sure that he or she identifies the best panel?
Yes, so as Greg has actually mentioned, I think that's exactly what people should do, is to go to our website, look at who were the panel member in the previous year in this panel, because they are working as generalists, you know, especially when they evaluate Part B1, but of course everybody wants to be evaluated by their peer. So I cannot recommend enough to look at the profile and go to the panel where you identify the people as being part of your community. If I mean, some panels, they fund a variety of projects, but you can also look at what the kind of projects that each panel have been funding, and that might also give you a hint. But talk to people, confront your ideas to your peers, and discuss with grantees. I mean, use all the programs you can to, I mean, what Davide has just described is really great for you if you want to get a hint of how to do, or you need some help or some mentoring. So don't hesitate.
Great, thank you. The other question I've seen asked multiple times in different ways is if you could just elaborate on what counts as experience. I believe in other questions you've written responses to, Nadia, you've mentioned that experience, it just has to be competitive for your field or for your CV, but that the panel considers and evaluates unconventional career paths. So it does not need to be postdoc experience. It does not need to be necessarily traditional experience. It just needs to be competitive.
No, exactly. That's why it's so important to apply to the right panel, because they will know best, you know, what is competitive in what they mean. And it's true that in social sciences, for example, you don't evaluate the CV as you evaluate them in life science. And there I could not give one format answer, because the best thing you can do is to show your CV to other researchers in your field and ask for their opinion, and because those are the people who will be evaluating you. I mean, we don't have, it's not magic, you know, we just take people from the field and we ask them what they think. That's the only thing we do.
Yeah. And to touch on another question that was asked, someone wrote out, when are the identities of the panel evaluators announced? So this is simply after the call closes. So if you go to the ERC website and you search for panel evaluators, there should be a single page that lists a lot of the 2020 and the 2021 calls that have already closed, the identities of
Yes.
all of those evaluators.
Yeah, so everything is confidential until the panel is closed, because we want to guarantee the independence of our evaluators. So we only publish the name in the end, but it gives you an idea of the kind of profile that will be looking at your proposal. And
Okay,
again,
great.
just one thing, if I can add, they cannot be specialists in everything. So when you write the Part B1, you need to write it to make sure it's understandable by someone from your domain or your discipline, but who might not get all the jargon and nitty-gritty of your specific research field. So keep that in mind. And actually, I was answering to Erin when you asked me the question, so I'll just do it here. So she was asking how much, how deep she has to go when she writes the methodology in Part B1, because it's true that the methodology is more for Part B2. Well, you need to put enough details basically to prove that the project is feasible. So you don't need to go into all the detail, but for example, if you are doing a clinical studies, you have to show that you have thought of the power calculation and that you know your study is strong enough. You know, that's the kind of thing. It's true that the methodology is for Part B2, but please put enough, you know, and don't think that Part B1 is just a summary of Part B2. So don't write Part B2 and then do a quick summary 2 days before the deadline and you submit it, because the panel would shortlist you for the interview based on those 5 pages. So just, you know, you can even start with those 5 pages. You know, you put the essential element there to convince them that it's worth interviewing you and that your idea is worth looking at. I hope I answered your question, Erin.
We'll keep it. I think in the chat you got a thank you. So that's
Okay.
a positive answer. To close the loop on an earlier question, just about experience, someone asks, this was before we addressed this, but just to make sure someone has a fullness of an answer, 2 to 7 years of experience in what? Individual research, or should it be under a research institution? So I would hope that this ties into the consideration of unconventional experience, and it doesn't require it to be under a formal institution.
Okay, so here, so you have 2 things to consider. You have the eligibility window. So this is the time between which you can apply to a certain type of grants. Then, you know, the career path, it really depends on, you know, it's true that sometimes we have grantees. Actually, I met one 2 years ago in France. He went to industry and for several years, and then he came back and he applied for I think it was a Consolidated grant, and it was okay. You know, it was in neuroscience, and he could value the fact that he has been, no, it was not in neuroscience, actually, sorry, it was chemistry, but he could value that he has been, you know, learning things and developing his CV and skills in the industry, and then he decided to apply. And it's the same when we say independent researchers. You know, people were asking independent from what? Well, you have to show that those are your ideas. That's actually why we interview the people. Those grants, they are there to find the researchers. I mean, for starting grant, it's more the potential they have to be creative and to propose good research and to propose innovative research lines, you know. But what you have to show is that it's your idea, that you are able to do good research, you are able to take the science further ahead. You know, it's not about the societal impact, or it's not about quotas. It's really what you could bring to your field. That's why we insist so much that those people who will evaluate you are the people from your field. So you should, when you evaluate your independence, well, first you need to have at least a paper without your PhD supervisor. So that's one way to show your independence. At the Consolidated grade, it's good, you know, to have a paper or monographs, or, I mean, I'm a biologist, so I'm sorry if I'm biased with my examples. Yeah, but you could, show that you have published as a corresponding author, for example, that you could also show that the publication you are listing, you had a major role in them, that that they were your idea, or you had a crucial role because you have developed a specific technology for this, So there is various way, of doing that. That you just have. It's just that it's not a grant. Let's put it like it's not a grant, for you to continue in your postdoc or your PhD lab doing the same thing, or bringing one more grant to your supervisor. That's not about that. What we want you to do is to fly with this grant. So yeah,
No, that's
I hope.
comprehensive. Thank you.
Yeah.
Nadia, I'll ask a question to Professor Mittman and have you scan the pending questions or answered questions to see if there's any one or two that you'd like to elaborate on. And then Greg, someone had asked you, and I thought your answer was great. Maybe if you could just speak to it verbally for a moment, how the structure of your employment is, particularly as a third country national and therefore needing a visa. And I think you're muted, so I'll just invite you to unmute yourself.
Yep. So my appointment is set up. I am a guest, a guest research professor at LMU, and the HR office at LMU was very helpful in doing all the paperwork for securing a work visa. Once I get to Germany, my intention is to apply for an EU blue card, which would give me 5 years access, since I'll be 5 years employed there. Yeah, and someone else had mentioned there was also a question I saw about where does the salary come from. Nadia can speak more to other grants. In my case, my salary was built into the ERC. It's being funded by the ERC proposal. The host institution is required to provide certain kinds of administrative support in the agreement and so forth. There is an agreement, once the grant is awarded, there's an agreement that the host institution has to sign, making certain commitments to the grant. And I am, to answer another question, I still have an appointment at my home institution, but I'm taking a 50% leave from my home institution to be able to spend 50% time at Ludwig Maximilian University. Excuse me.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I'm keeping an eye on the chat just in case anyone has any non-question remarks that they'd like us to share. I hope that the majority of the answers we're giving, unless there's personal information or something highly specific, I try to always make sure my written response is viewable to all. So if I could just have someone in the audience confirm that they can see that, that's great. Nadia, I know I've asked you to look at a question or two you want to share. If I could also add a quick question that was recently submitted. Someone asks, they say that it takes about a year or so to go through the scientific evaluation and granting process. So their question centers around the timing. The starting grant is 2 to 7 years experience post completion of the PhD. Does that mean one could apply with 1 year of experience, knowing that by the time that year is over, they would then be eligible? Or is it the date of submission of your application as opposed to the start date?
No, so the date is the 1st of January of the year of the call. So that's our reference date. And then we calculate the time passed since the PhD date, but you need to have 2 years accomplished. So at the time you submit, basically. So it's not, so you will not start before 3 years after your PhD, I'm sorry.
Okay, great. I'm sorry that I've asked you to select some questions you like, and then I keep seeing new good questions come in, and I just want to interrupt and go right to them.
Just fire.
All right, fire away. Someone asked, they've been a research fellow for 10 years with several publications, but just completed their PhD this year. How would that pre-PhD research experience count for the purpose of a proposal?
So let me think. So basically, they have completed the PhD 2 years ago.
Just now, but let's say they're looking to apply for starting grants or let's say they're looking to apply for a grant in future years, in the near future, but they already have 10 years of experience. They just simply were not a PhD holder at the time.
Yeah, but we considered the track record since the beginning of their career. It's not that the panel member will not evaluate just the 2 years since PhD. They will evaluate the whole thing. The thing is that usually to show your independence, you know, it's easier to look at, you know, what you have done that is really from you. So without the PhD supervisor or so if you can show that, for example, in your PhD publication, the idea comes from you, then it can work, you know. But we don't discriminate what has been published before and after the PhD. No.
Great. I'll quickly take a question for myself, and then finally get to your questions, Nadia, if you want to share some remarks. Someone asked if there are other funding opportunities. I'll be happy to share this in an individual follow-up email to the person asking. For European postdocs doing research in the US, to complement ERC grants, one of the other major funding schemes that we promote are Marie Skłodowska-Curie Actions, or MSCA Actions. These are fellowships that allow people of all nationality, including Europeans, to go to Europe if they're based outside of Europe, but also allow Europeans to go outside of Europe for periods of time to conduct research. So I'll be happy to share resources on that. And then also I would say generally, you can always search the EURAXESS job board, which has generally over 10,000. I think I recently checked, it was over 8,000 positions, generally based in Europe, but also there's North America-based positions here and there. So you could find funding sources there. So I just want to make sure I spoke to the EURAXESS job board and the services. Complementing the job board is the funding portal. So that's where you'll find information on ERC grants, MSCA fellowships, which are the two, I say, primary funding schemes we support. As new questions continue to come in, I think we'll be, everyone's been generous with their time. Maybe we'll try to address a couple extra, but Nadia, finally, I'd like to have you address any questions that maybe you've identified that will be relevant.
Let's see. Well, actually, I just saw a question in the chat about can a group of 2 to 4 PI apply for starting grant? No. So, so if you are a group of PI, then it's Synergy. It's the only collaborative grant we have. But you can be at the level of starting grant. You know, like you can be 2 to 7 years after your PhD and apply for a Synergy grant altogether. That's also fine. I mean, it's just that it's a Synergy grant, then it's not anymore a starting grant. A starting grant, Consolidated Advance, you are the only PI. You can have partners, you can have collaborators, but you will be the main PI. So it's you and your host institution. And just to make it clear, you don't have to be in the host institution when you apply for a grant, but you need a commitment letter. So you need a letter. There is a template on our website. You need a letter from the host institution saying they will support you and host you when or if you get the grant, and they don't need to pay for your salary. You can include the salary in the budget as a commitment I have just mentioned, but you need this commitment letter. And don't worry if you are afraid to apply to a European country that you have never really lived in, or the grant are portable. So if you get a grant, that's your grant. And what counts is you and your well-being. And if after a few months or a few years, you think that you will be happier in another European country, you can just take the grant and move to another country or host institution. It's totally fine for us. It's really you and your career that counts.
Great. I think maybe we'll have time for 1 or 2 more questions. And then if you've asked a question with your name, not anonymously, and it's pending in the Q&A, I'll do my best to try to connect with you and reach out. But I think we've answered a large majority so far. So I don't know, Greg and Nadia and Davide, I'll invite you if there's anything that jumps out at you is something that you can give a solid answer to right away. I'll invite you just to take that. And then from there, I'll do my best to connect with individual askers after the webinar. And as a final reminder, this will all be recorded and shared afterwards. So please keep an eye on email that you'll get from us tomorrow, where I'll include all the PowerPoint presentations as well.
And there is one question about COVID. maybe that I can take this. So we don't have special extension due to COVID for the eligibility window. What we have put in place is that we have a part of our application form where you can actually justify if you had, to have a break in your research activity because of the COVID. So this will be seen by the panel member who evaluate your proposal, and they will be able to take it into account when they evaluate your track record. So, if the lab was closed or you had to be at home with the kids, and then, you were not able to be as performant as you wish during this period. I mean, it has impacted everybody. So don't worry, but at least you can explain more specifically the reason. And but of course, for example, if one of your family member was sick and you had to take time to take care of it, this is like an official reason to extend the eligibility window. But otherwise, because it has impacted everybody everywhere, we just decided it would have been too complicated to start playing with the eligibility window, but you can explain the reason for your delays in your applications.
Great, thank you. I think with that, just to be aware of time, we'll wrap up. I will right now share some links to all of the different EURAXESS resources, including the flash note emails, the website email address. You can contact us with any pending questions, and then all of the social media channels. I'm also just going to quickly share, is Nadia included in her presentation, a list of the national contact points. So here's a short URL that will take you to the portal of the European Commission, where you can search within each European country. Eventually, the Canadian NCPs will also be added there, and there are none in the United States. However, we at EURAXESS North America are happy to take those. And I'm also finally going to include 2 recordings of webinars we held in conjunction with ERC speakers last year. As Nadia also mentioned, these do change year to year, so please use any past resources and guides as food for thought, but know that there are changes on a year-by-year basis. She mentioned that there's 2 new panels that were added that did not exist previously. So I would make sure anything you're looking at really is for the 2021 and 2022 call period. But regardless, those will be excellent archives that are a year less or a year old or less. So with that, if any of the speakers have closing remarks they'd like to give, I'm happy to share the floor. And then with that, we'll simply make the recording available later tonight, and you'll get that automated email tomorrow. So Dr. Innocenti, Dr. El-Majid, and Dr. Mittman, thank you all very much. My colleague and I, Dr. Buitina Karjan, remain available to you, so please don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you everyone for the very active discussion in the chat and in the Q&A session. We hope this has been useful, and we look forward to supporting you in your research career. So thank you everyone.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.